I'm Naomi Bennett, 31 years old, and 3 weeks ago, I saved my nephew's life, only to be hit with a lawsuit from my own sister and brother-in-law. That morning is burned into my memory like fire on paper. It was raining hard, one of those wild spring storms that makes the streets in our little Oregon town flood in minutes. I was driving home from a night shift at the hospital. I'm a trauma nurse, so my adrenaline was already running thin when I saw the car. A red SUV halfway submerged in the ditch near Hillside Park. At first, I thought it had just been abandoned. But then I saw a little face in the backseat window, mouth open in a silent cry. My heart dropped. It was my nephew, Ethan. My sister Miranda's son. He's only 6. I didn't think. I threw my car in park and ran straight into the water. It was waist-high, freezing cold, and moving fast. By the time I yanked that door open and dragged Ethan out, the current was already tugging the vehicle deeper. Another 10 minutes and that boy would have drowned. He clung to me, soaking wet and sobbing, his tiny hands trembling against my scrubs. I wrapped him in my coat and called 911. I expected a thank you. Instead, I got served. 2 days later, a man in a dark jacket showed up at my door with papers. Miranda and her husband Jack were suing me for endangering their parental authority and unauthorized medical interference. Let that sink in. I saved their child. And they responded with legal action. I stood on my front porch holding those documents, heart pounding, hands shaking, trying to process what had just happened. But that was only the beginning. This morning, I got another letter. A family mediation request, as they put it. I'm expected to show up at my parents' house this weekend. My entire family will be there, Mom, Dad, my brother Evan, and Miranda's slick attorney husband Jack, of course. They think I'll back down. They think I'll stay quiet and keep the peace like I always have. But not this time. Because what they don't know is, I recorded everything. Every voicemail. Every message. Every threat. And when I walk into that living room on Sunday, I won't be coming empty-handed. So if you're watching this and you've ever been betrayed by your own family after doing the right thing, if you've ever felt alone just for standing up for someone else, drop your city in the comments and subscribe. Because you won't believe what happened when I confronted them with the truth. Growing up, my family was the kind that looked perfect from the outside. We had the manicured lawn, the golden retriever, the front porch with wind chimes and rocking chairs. My dad, Calvin, ran a plumbing business he'd inherited from his father. Mom, Lillian, taught 2nd grade at the local elementary school. Sundays were for pot roasts, and Christmas mornings were camera-ready. But beneath the hallmark exterior, the cracks started early. Miranda, my older sister by 4 years, had always been the favorite. The first miracle baby after years of trying. The beautiful one, the performer. She was the one with glittery dance recitals, birthday parties that made the newspaper's community page, and walls covered in trophies. I was quieter. A late bloomer. Sensitive, observant, the kind of kid who read novels under the table during dinner and memorized every face in a crowded room. I wasn't jealous, exactly, I was used to being the background. What I really wanted wasn't attention. It was connection. Warmth. Understanding. And I got that, not from my parents, not from Miranda, but from my Aunt Carol. Aunt Carol was my mother's sister, a pediatric nurse who never married and never seemed to mind. She lived in a small cottage on the edge of town, where the scent of lavender always drifted through open windows, and her kitchen smelled like cinnamon tea. She was the first person who looked me in the eyes and saw me, really saw me. She said, "Naomi, you have the kind of soul that doesn't need a spotlight. You're a lighthouse. Quiet, steady, life-saving." When I was 12, I stayed with her for a whole summer while my parents were dealing with Miranda's first legal trouble, something about a stolen credit card and a boyfriend who took the fall. Carol and I would walk her garden every morning, watering herbs and talking about people, about ethics, about the strange, complicated beauty of being human. You don't have to be loud to be strong, she told me once, pressing a smooth stone into my palm. You just have to be clear about who you are. That stone still sits in my nightstand drawer. When I chose nursing as my path, everyone seemed confused. Miranda had bounced between fashion school, yoga certification, and a stint as a wellness influencer, depending on the year. Evan, our younger brother, worked for Dad's plumbing business. But me? I wanted to work in trauma. You'll see so much pain, Carol warned gently. I said, but I'll be there in the pain. That matters. She nodded, proud. She got it. When Carol passed away 5 years ago, pancreatic cancer, fast and vicious, I held her hand until the last breath. I was the one who read her favorite poetry in her final hours. My mother never came to the hospital. Miranda showed up late, brought flowers, and spent the visit scrolling through Instagram stories about her boutique candle line. At the funeral, I stood at the podium with my eulogy shaking in my hands. Miranda was already asking about Carol's lake cabin before the reception even ended. That moment, that contrast, stuck with me. Because Carol had left the cabin to me. Just like she'd left me her journals, her stethoscope, and her library of psychology books marked with little notes in the margins. Miranda rolled her eyes and said, "Seriously? She gave you the property? It's just a creaky cabin, anyway." But a month later, she asked me to co-sign a loan using the cabin as collateral. I declined. That was the first time she said I was selfish. The second time was when Ethan was born. Miranda wasn't built for motherhood. I say that not in judgment, but with observation honed by years of watching her. She loved the Instagram version of being a mom, coordinated outfits, carefully post family photos, hashtags about boy mom life. But the real work? The midnight fevers, the tantrums, the early morning routines? That always seemed to fall to someone else. Most of the time, that someone else was me. I was the one she called when Ethan had colic and wouldn't sleep. I was the one who stayed up rocking him while she locked herself in the bathroom with wine and headphones. I was the one who took him to urgent care when he spiked a 104-degree fever because Jack couldn't leave a golf tournament. And I never said no. Not once. Because Ethan wasn't just my nephew. He was my heart. The first time he reached for me instead of his mom when he cried, I knew. I was his safe place. Just like Carol had been mine. But I also knew that being his safety net put a target on my back. Jack resented me. Called me Nurse Nancy when he thought I couldn't hear. Said, "You're not his parent, Naomi. Know your place." Miranda would sigh and say, "You make me feel like a bad mom when you do everything better." I never tried to. I just couldn't stand to see that boy in pain. And maybe that was the real crime in their eyes. Because when you stand in contrast to someone else's neglect, not by judging them, but simply by showing up, it makes their indifference glaring. The day I pulled Ethan from that sinking SUV, I knew the backlash would come. What I didn't expect was the speed and cruelty of it. "You had no right." Miranda screamed over the phone that night, voice shrill with rage. I said, "He was in danger. He was alone." Jack added coldly, "You're not a hero, Naomi. You're a liability." I hung up. It was the first time I let myself cry. Not because of the lawsuit. But because of the sick, sinking feeling in my chest that this wasn't about one moment. This was years of resentment, of guilt, of buried inferiority, boiling over. I looked around my apartment, small, neat, quiet. The place I'd built for myself through 12-hour shifts, missed holidays, and student loan sacrifices. It wasn't flashy. But it was mine. And I realized something. They didn't just want to punish me for rescuing Ethan. They wanted to erase the years of quiet integrity that made them feel small. And I wasn't going to let them. Not this time. Because Carol had taught me better. Because Ethan deserved better. And because the truth was finally on my side. The days after receiving that lawsuit were a strange combination of numbness and fire. I moved through my hospital shifts like a ghost, answering trauma calls, setting IVs, stitching wounds, all while this heavy pressure built in my chest, like I was walking around with a loaded syringe of betrayal stuck between my ribs. The lawsuit wasn't just a legal tactic. It was personal. It was a message. You're not part of our family anymore. It didn't matter that I had risked my life dragging Ethan from that flooded SUV. It didn't matter that I was the one who held his hand through countless pediatric visits. None of it mattered. Because now I had made Miranda and Jack feel exposed, powerless. And that was unforgivable. The next emotional blow came 2 days later. I was halfway through charting a patient's notes when my phone buzzed. A message from my mom. Family discussion. Sunday dinner. Please come. We need to talk. That was it. No how are you, no acknowledgement of the lawsuit. Just a command dressed in polite punctuation. I stared at it for a long time before replying, I'll come. 1 hour only. I told myself I was going for Ethan. For clarity. For closure. But deep down, I knew, I needed to hear it from their lips. The truth. The venom. All of it. Sunday arrived, and so did the migraine. Walking into my parents' house felt like stepping onto a stage where everyone had already rehearsed their lines but I hadn't been given a script. Mom was at the stove, wearing her favorite apron that read "Bless this mess," stirring a pot of stew like nothing was wrong. Dad sat silently in his recliner, pretending to read the paper. Evan nodded at me from the kitchen table but avoided eye contact. Jack and Miranda were already seated, holding glasses of red wine like it was just another family gathering and not the scene of an emotional ambush. Miranda didn't smile. She said, "You look tired, Naomi. Everything okay at work?" I didn't respond. Mom set the ladle down and turned, her voice too sweet. She said, "Honey, we've been talking. And we think it's time you let this whole thing settle down. Lawsuits are just gestures. We can resolve this like family." I said, "Gestures? You're talking about a legal attack." Jack raised his eyebrows. "Nobody attacked you. We just felt our parental rights were violated. You pulled Ethan out of that car without consulting us. Without even calling us first." I laughed. "The car was underwater, Jack. I didn't have time for a family conference call." Evan finally spoke, voice quiet. "I think what Jack means is, it caught everyone off guard. Maybe you acted a little, impulsively." My stomach turned. I looked at my brother, searching for a trace of the sibling who used to share Pop-Tarts with me on the back steps when we were kids. I asked, "Are you siding with them?" He shrugged. "I'm not siding with anyone. I just don't want more drama." Miranda crossed her legs and leaned forward, her voice low and precise. She said, "Here's what we're proposing. You drop your countersuit. Publicly apologize for making us look negligent. And we withdraw the complaint." I stared at her. She continued, "We'll all sign a non-disclosure agreement. It keeps this private. You get to keep your little job. We don't pursue damages. Everybody wins." My mouth went dry. "An NDA? Public apology?" I said, "You want me to apologize for saving Ethan?" Mom stepped in again, voice trembling with that classic, performative concern. She said, "Naomi, honey. Can't you just let it go? This stress isn't good for any of us. And it's putting a strain on the whole family." I replied, "Strain? No, you want to talk about strain? I worked double shifts to help pay for Ethan's preschool when you two were in Cabo. I spent Christmas Eve in an ER, then came to your house and watched you praise Miranda for her beautiful family. And I didn't say a word. That's strain." Silence. Then Dad folded his paper and said, "Naomi, your tone is out of line. This isn't how we talk to each other." I looked at him. I said, "No, this is exactly how we talk. You all say what you want. And I'm expected to nod and make peace. Mom clutched her hands together. You're blowing this out of proportion. Your sister is doing the best she can. She's under a lot of pressure. Miranda added, yeah, from you. That's when it hit me, this wasn't just a disagreement. This was a coordinated erasure. Jack stood up and walked over, setting a manila folder on the coffee table. He said, if you want to see how serious we are, you'll want to read this. Deposition schedule. Our attorneys are done waiting. I didn't touch the folder. I said, you're going to put Ethan through this? Courtrooms? Judges? Press, maybe? Jack replied, we're protecting him. From you. There it was. No subtlety. No ambiguity. I nodded, slowly. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From clarity. I stood, adjusted my coat, and looked at each of them. I said, I'm not dropping anything. I have nothing to apologize for. You can keep your NDAs and your fake smiles and your Sunday dinners. I'll see you in court. I walked out. The wind hit me like a baptism. Cold, clean, final. That night, I broke down in my apartment. Not because of what they said, but because, for the first time in years, I stopped defending people who never defended me. The next morning, I told my friend and colleague, Alina. She had been my closest friend at the hospital since our residency days. Thoughtful, fierce, the kind of woman who always knew when to ask and when to simply listen. I told her everything. Alina said, they're playing a long con, Naomi. They're banking on your compassion. Your history of folding. But they messed up this time. Because now? You have nothing left to lose. I nodded, tears hot in my eyes. She added, you know what they didn't count on? I said, what? She replied, that you'd stop protecting them. And in that moment, something shifted in me. The part of me that used to crave their approval was gone. I didn't need their praise. I didn't need their seats at Christmas or their fake concern. What I needed was truth. And truth has evidence. It was time to gather mine. The day after that family dinner, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called a lawyer. Alina had given me the name of a woman she trusted, a no-nonsense family law attorney named Cassandra Lynn. Her reputation among hospital staff was legendary. She had represented several nurses wrongfully terminated or scapegoated in malpractice cases, and she had won all of them. I said, Cassandra? My name is Naomi Bennett. I need help. It's complicated, but I saved my nephew's life, and now my sister is suing me. There was a pause on the line. Then she said, come in tomorrow. Bring everything. So I did. The next morning, I sat in Cassandra's glass-walled office downtown, clutching a tote bag full of old messages, printed emails, screenshots, and even Ethan's emergency medical records from that day. I had been quietly compiling everything since the lawsuit was served, unsure what might matter. She flipped through it all methodically, a pen tucked behind her ear, her eyes sharp and unreadable. Cassandra said, let me make sure I understand. They're suing you for rescuing your nephew from a vehicle that was sinking into floodwaters? I nodded. And they're framing it as what, negligence? Parental overreach? They're saying I violated their rights. That I made them look like bad parents, I said. Cassandra leaned back and crossed her legs. She said, well, they did a good enough job of that themselves. I blinked. She continued, I can get this thrown out. But that's not the real question, Naomi. The real question is, do you want to stop this? Or do you want to finish it? I swallowed. What does finishing it look like? Cassandra gave a half smile. Holding them accountable. Publicly. Legally. Financially. I didn't answer right away. But I knew the truth. This wasn't just about me. It was about Ethan. About every time I'd stayed silent. Every time I cleaned up their mess and let them call it parenting. I said, I want to finish it. And so it began. For the next 3 weeks, I became my own personal detective. Every evening after my hospital shifts, I would pull on sweats, make a cup of tea, and start digging. First, the voicemails. Miranda had a habit of leaving long, ranting messages when she was angry or drunk. Over the years, I'd saved dozens, because they felt like proof even before I knew I'd need them. I pulled out my old backup drives and started converting them. There was one from 2 years ago, the night she forgot to pick up Ethan from daycare. She had said, "You need to stop making me look bad, Naomi. I know you think you're some perfect little savior, but you're not his mom. So stay out of it." Then another from the week Ethan had pneumonia and Jack refused to leave a conference to come home. She said, "I don't know what I'd do if you weren't around. Honestly, I'm not even sure I want to be a mom anymore. I never asked for this." Chilling words. Raw. Unfiltered. I labeled and timestamped every single file. Next, the text messages. There were years of them, requests for money, help, babysitting, school pickups. The tone always the same, desperate charm when they needed something, passive-aggressive guilt trips when I said no. One series stood out. It was from last summer, when Miranda left Ethan with me for an entire weekend without asking. The texts read, "Miranda, hey, we had to take a last-minute trip. Just keep Ethan. He's fine with you. You're like his second mom anyway. Me, Miranda, you can't just drop him off unannounced. Miranda, oh come on. You know you love playing house. Playing house." I forwarded everything to Cassandra. Then I turned to financial records. That part was harder. I hadn't realized just how much I had given them over the years. Venmo logs. Bank transfers. Grocery receipts. I had paid for preschool tuition 1 year. Dance classes. Even dental work. Miranda and Jack never reimbursed a cent. But the most damning document came from my patient records file at the hospital. The day I pulled Ethan from that car, I'd brought him to the ER and checked him in under a pediatric trauma alert. As his legal guardian? No. But I had listed myself as his aunt, with a note, "Parent unreachable. No contact available." The hospital had a record of multiple attempts to reach Miranda and Jack. They didn't answer. That detail mattered. A lot. Because it confirmed I hadn't just acted out of emotion, I had followed protocol, stepped in only when emergency response failed. Cassandra's voice crackled through the phone the next day. She said, "This is gold. And I just got the opposing side's discovery packet. Naomi, they're bluffing. They don't have a leg to stand on. No real damages. No proof you overstepped. They're trying to scare you into silence." I replied, "So what happens now?" She answered, "Now we file for dismissal. But we also file for defamation. And, if you're ready, for temporary guardianship." My heart stopped. She continued, "Ethan was endangered. There's precedent here. You have the documentation. And from the sound of things, you've been his primary caretaker for years." I whispered, "I don't want to take him away from his parents. I just want him safe." "And safe means boundaries," she said. "It means facts. Which you now have." I stared at the stack of evidence on my kitchen table. Emails. Voice memos. Financial records. Photos. Receipts. A paper trail of emotional negligence a mile long. It was overwhelming. But it was also clarifying. Because when I looked at all of it together, the truth was no longer something I had to explain or defend. It was there. In black and white. Alina came over that weekend to help me organize everything into binders. She sat on my floor, labeling dividers with a Sharpie. She said, "You're doing the hard thing. The right thing. Even if no one claps." I said, "No one ever claps for me, Alina." She smiled. "They will when this story is told." That night, I stayed up late rereading one of Aunt Carol's old journals. There was a line I had underlined a decade ago. Silence is not grace. Silence is complicity, dressed in manners. And I knew what I had to do. I printed out copies of everything. 3 sets. One for Cassandra. One for the judge. And one for the family meeting I had just called. Because this time I would be the one asking everyone to sit down. And they wouldn't like what I had to say. The invitation I sent was short and pointed. Family meeting. My place. Saturday. 3 p.m. sharp. Be on time. I didn't give them a reason. I didn't offer tea or pleasantries. And for once, I didn't ask permission. Saturday came cold and overcast. My apartment, small but immaculately tidy, was staged with precision. Every document, photo, and audio transcript was labeled and stacked. 3 sets, one for Miranda and Jack, one for my parents, and one for Evan. The front door buzzed at 2:57 p.m. Right on time. Of course. They filed in like they were attending a sermon. Miranda was in full armor, perfect blowout, tight blazer, manicured nails clacking against her phone. Jack walked in behind her, carrying himself like a man stepping into a deposition, ironic, given the real one looming. Mom followed with a casserole dish. I didn't even comment. Evan came last, shoulders hunched, gaze already guilty. I stood by the table and gestured to the chairs. Sit, I said. All of you. Miranda scoffed, what is this, an intervention? Jack muttered, this better not take long. I handed each person a thick binder. No speeches yet, I said. Start reading. They flipped through the pages. Mom gasped when she saw the texts, screenshots of Miranda's messages begging me to take Ethan for days at a time, calling me his real mom anyway. She flipped faster, the color draining from her face. Dad's lips tightened as he read financial breakdowns, over $8,000 in direct transfers from my accounts to theirs over 5 years. Receipts for Ethan's medical bills. School enrollment fees. Grocery lists. Evan froze on the voicemail transcript from Miranda's 2 a.m. call, the one where she confessed she was never cut out for this and wished she could just disappear. Jack stopped cold when he reached the transcript from the hospital's triage log. It clearly noted multiple unanswered calls to the parents during Ethan's emergency. A nurse's note even said, Aunt Naomi present. Child calmed immediately. No parental contact established. When no one spoke, I began. You tried to erase what happened, I said. You tried to make this about your image, your ego, your embarrassment. But now it's about facts. Miranda snapped her binder shut. She said, what, you think printing out some texts makes you a saint? Everyone knows families vent. You think that's proof of something? I replied, no. I think dragging me into court is proof of something. I think trying to silence me with NDAs and threats is proof of something. And I think Ethan screaming in a back seat while your car filled with water is proof of everything. Jack leaned forward, expression cold. He said, this is emotional manipulation. You're trying to flip the narrative. I turned to him. I didn't flip the narrative, I said. You did, when you sued me for saving your son. Dad finally spoke, voice low. Naomi, this is ugly. It's not how family handles things. I looked him dead in the eye. No, Dad. This is exactly how our family handles things. We pretend. We guilt. We cover. We protect the image at all costs. Well, not anymore. Mom shook her head slowly. You're making us look like monsters. I nodded. You did that all by yourselves. Evan's voice broke the silence. He said, I didn't know about the lawsuit until after they filed it. I swear. I turned to him, bitter laugh rising in my throat. You've never known anything, Evan. That's your role, right? Stay out of it. Keep the peace. Look the other way. He flinched, but didn't argue. Miranda stood. She said, so what now? What do you want, Naomi? You want money? You want custody? What's your angle? I stared at her. I want the truth on record, I said. I want a public retraction of the lawsuit. I want documented proof that you lied about the circumstances. And I want temporary guardianship filed until the courts can assess Ethan's situation fully. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. You can fight it, I added. But I've got every call, every transfer, every ignored emergency documented. I've got hospital logs. Witnesses. And a legal team who's already filed. So fight if you want. Jack stood too. You're bluffing, he said. I walked over to the bookshelf, opened the small safe I had bolted to the wall, and pulled out a single document, my notarized motion for temporary guardianship, stamped by Cassandra's office. I placed it in front of them. You wanted to play legal games, I said. Now we're playing by the rules. For a moment, no one moved. Then Miranda's voice cracked for the first time. She said, you don't know what it's like. The pressure. Jack's firm. My investors. My life. Everything we've built depends on people seeing us a certain way. I said, then maybe you should have built something real. Jack growled, this isn't over. No, I said. It's just beginning. They left without another word. Evan stayed behind. He whispered, are you really going through with it? I nodded. I don't want to hurt them, I said. But I won't let Ethan be collateral damage anymore. He didn't argue. He just sat down and put his head in his hands. When he finally left, it was dark outside. Alina came by an hour later, holding takeout and a quiet smile. She said, so, how'd it go? I leaned against the wall, exhaustion hitting me like a wave. I said, they finally saw the receipts. She raised her cup. To facts, she said. We clinked drinks and sat in silence, the weight of the day finally lifting, just a little. And somewhere inside, I felt it, a shift. This wasn't just about Ethan anymore. It was about choosing truth over silence. And this time, no one was going to erase me. The Monday after the confrontation, Cassandra filed everything with the court. The petition for temporary guardianship. The motion to dismiss Miranda and Jack's lawsuit. The countersuit for defamation and emotional distress. It was official now, on record, with signatures, case numbers, and judges attached. I stood in front of the courthouse that morning in my navy scrubs, hair pulled back, badge clipped to my pocket. I had worked the overnight shift and gone straight from the hospital. I hadn't even changed. Cassandra glanced at me sideways and said, you look tired. I replied, I'm not. I'm done. She smiled, not kindly, but with approval. Good. Stay done. The judge issued an emergency hearing within 3 days. Because of the seriousness of the claims and the stack of documentation we submitted, the court wanted to hear from all parties, fast. Especially given the allegations of parental neglect and the near-death incident involving Ethan. Miranda and Jack, predictably, tried to postpone. Their lawyer filed for a continuance, citing emotional strain and unnecessary publicity. The judge denied it. The hearing was held in a small courtroom with beige walls and buzzing fluorescent lights. Nothing dramatic. No jury. Just a judge, 2 attorneys, and a family falling apart at opposite tables. I took the stand first. Cassandra guided me through the timeline, Ethan's accident, the rescue, the emergency room visit, and the lawsuit that followed. She entered every document into evidence. Every message. Every receipt. Every voicemail. When the judge asked why I was seeking temporary guardianship, my voice didn't shake. I said, because Ethan needs safety and stability. And because I'm tired of watching him be a prop for 2 people who care more about appearances than parenting. The courtroom was silent. When Miranda took the stand, she looked like a wilted version of herself. The makeup was heavier, but the confidence was gone. She stumbled over her words, trying to explain that the lawsuit had just been an unfortunate misunderstanding. Jack looked angrier than ever. He said, "She made us look like criminals. She took advantage of our trust." Cassandra stood. She asked, "Mr. Callahan, do you consider it an act of trust when you sue your sister for rescuing your son from a sinking vehicle?" He stammered, "It wasn't, we didn't think she'd actually." The judge raised his hand. "That's enough," he said. "I've read the materials. I've reviewed the emergency records. And I've heard more than enough testimony." He turned to me. "Ms. Bennett, your actions likely saved your nephew's life. The court finds no merit in the plaintiff's claims against you and grants your motion to dismiss." I exhaled for the first time in weeks. Then he turned to Miranda and Jack. "Furthermore, based on the evidence presented, the court finds reasonable grounds to grant Ms. Bennett temporary guardianship of Ethan Callahan pending further investigation by Child Protective Services." Miranda gasped. "No. You can't do that. He's our son." The judge interrupted. "He is. But parental rights come with responsibilities. Which, frankly, you seem to have delegated to your sister for years." Jack stood abruptly. "This is insane. We'll appeal." The judge replied, "That is your right. But you will do so while your son is living in a home where his safety is prioritized." The gavel came down. Just once. Quiet. Final. Outside the courtroom, Miranda caught up to me in the hallway. Her voice was hoarse, almost unfamiliar. She said, "You really went through with it." I replied, "You really gave me no choice." Her face twisted. She said, "Do you know what people will think of us now?" I said, "I care what Ethan thinks." Jack didn't look at me. He just walked past, muttering something I didn't catch. By the end of the week, Ethan was with me. He arrived holding a small backpack and one stuffed dinosaur. No explanations. No hugs goodbye. Just a drop-off from a social worker and a quiet car ride to my apartment. I made pancakes that night. He sat at the kitchen counter, legs swinging, eyes wide. He said, "Am I in trouble?" I crouched beside him. I said, "No, baby. You're safe. That's all." He ate 3 pancakes, curled up on my couch, and fell asleep during a nature documentary. For the first time in months, I slept too. The following weeks were a strange mix of comfort and chaos. I arranged therapy sessions for Ethan through the hospital's family services department. I coordinated with CPS. I filed paperwork for school transfers and pediatricians. I adjusted my shifts, dropped to part-time, and burned through vacation days. It wasn't easy. But it felt right. One evening, about 3 weeks in, my mom called. I let it go to voicemail. Then she texted. "Naomi, I don't know what to say. But I want to see him. I want to see you. Please." I waited a day before responding. Then I typed, "Not yet. I'm protecting him. I'm protecting myself. If you want to be part of our lives again, it has to look different. It has to start with accountability." She replied with a single message, "Okay." Evan showed up the following weekend with grocery bags and a sheepish look. He said, "I don't know if I deserve to be around. But I want to be. If you'll let me." I nodded, silently handed him a sponge, and we cleaned the kitchen side by side. We didn't talk about the past. We talked about Ethan's favorite dinosaur shows. About air fryers. About second chances. Cassandra called the next week. She said, "Miranda isn't appealing the guardianship order. They've withdrawn the lawsuit entirely. No settlement. No deal. Just gone." I asked, "Why?" She said, "My guess? Publicity. They know they lost. They want it to die quietly." I didn't feel triumphant. I felt calm. Not victorious. Just finally free. Ethan stayed with me through the end of the school year. And then, something unexpected. A handwritten letter from Miranda. 4 pages. No demands. No excuses. Just words like I failed him, and I hurt you, and I didn't understand what love actually looked like until I watched you show it. I didn't respond right away. But I saved the letter. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. But some can be restructured. With time. With work. With proof. I don't know what the future holds between me and Miranda. But I know what it holds for Ethan. Love. Stability. Truth. And pancakes on Sunday mornings. Sometimes the loudest victories are the quietest ones. There was no headline the day I officially received permanent guardianship of Ethan. No applause. No parade. Just a letter in the mail from the court, stamped and signed, confirming what I had already been living for months. He was mine. Not by biology or law alone, but by love, by choice, and by every unglamorous act that defines real family. I sat on my couch with that letter in hand, the sunlight slipping through the blinds in thin golden stripes, and I cried, not out of sadness or anger this time, but out of release. It was like my body had been carrying a locked-up storm for years, and now it could finally rain and be done with it. Ethan was at school that day, and I had the apartment to myself. No cartoons in the background, no toy dinosaurs underfoot. Just me, the quiet, and the knowledge that I had chosen the hard path, and stayed on it. That's what no one tells you about standing up for yourself, especially against your own family. It doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like silence. Like stillness. Like watching the dust settle after a long, wild fight and realizing the fight was never about winning, it was about walking away with your dignity still intact. The weeks that followed were filled with routines, small and grounding. Packing Ethan's lunch each morning. School drop-offs. Evenings spent reviewing math homework I barely remembered and learning the names of all the kids in his class. Saturdays meant visits to the park or movie nights with popcorn that always ended up between the cushions. It was exhausting. Beautiful. Real. For once, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the next collapse. I wasn't checking my phone every 5 minutes expecting a crisis. I wasn't second-guessing my worth every time someone dismissed me. I was just living. And that was enough. My relationship with my parents remained distant but civil. My mom sent a few messages after that first one, soft, careful words that sounded more like someone feeling out a stranger than talking to their daughter. I didn't ignore them, but I didn't rush to respond either. She had years of silence to sit with. Years I had lived through without her voice when I needed it most. My dad never reached out. That silence spoke louder than any words. Evan became a steady presence, not perfect, not emotionally expressive, but present. He helped me assemble Ethan's new bunk bed, came over on weekends with groceries, and even made it to one of Ethan's school art shows. We never addressed the courtroom. Or the years before it. But sometimes healing looks like showing up without being asked. Miranda stayed away. And honestly, that was okay. The letter she sent remained folded in the back of my dresser drawer, its creases worn from the times I had opened it just to reread one line or another. I didn't hate her. I didn't even feel anger anymore. Just space. Distance. A kind of understanding that some people change and some people don't, and your peace can't depend on their decision. I still think about Aunt Carol often. I think about how she taught me that integrity wasn't about applause, but about consistency. How she lived quietly but with great depth. How she saw me before I even knew who I was. I hope I'm becoming a bit more like her each day. And maybe that's what all of this has really been about, not just defending Ethan, or clearing my name, or standing up to my sister, but about becoming who I was always meant to be. Someone who doesn't flinch when the world says sit down. Someone who chooses hard truths over easy lies. Someone who builds a life not with glitter, but with grit. Ethan is thriving now. He's sleeping through the night again, drawing superheroes and writing short stories with crayon-scrawled dialogue and wild plots. His teachers say he's more confident, more grounded. He laughs more. He has a favorite hoodie he refuses to take off, and I let him wear it as many days as it takes to feel safe in his skin. Some nights, when the dishes are done and he's curled up beside me on the couch, I look over at him and wonder how close we came to losing this. To losing him. And then I remember, we didn't. Because when the moment came, I ran into the water. And I didn't look back. So if you're still watching, thank you. Thank you for walking through this story with me. And I want to say something to anyone out there who has felt like the outsider in their own family. The one who gives more than they get. The one who sees what others ignore. The one who keeps the peace until the silence starts to poison your spirit. Please hear this, you are not crazy. You are not dramatic. You are not selfish for saying enough. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop explaining and start protecting your peace. Sometimes love means boundaries. Sometimes the best way to honor your family is to be nothing like them. And sometimes, the person who saves the child is also the person who finally saves herself. If you've ever been in a position like mine, if you've had to fight for your truth, for your dignity, or for a child who couldn't speak for themselves, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from or what part of this story hit home for you. And please, if you want more stories like this one, about standing up, breaking cycles, and choosing integrity, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support helps stories like mine reach the people who need to hear them most. Until next time, this is Naomi. Take care of yourself. And if no one else tells you today, you're doing better than you think. Stay strong. Stay honest. Stay you.